Hey everybody, welcome to the Daniel Davis Deep Dive, where we're having our new feature here with Ian Puddick, the smartest man in London, trying to figure out what in the world's going. I'm always going to say it. You can shake your head all day, but I'm gonna.
Yeah, don't shake your head no, Ian. We know better.
Yeah, we know better. I know you're just being
No,
nice and polite and
not,
all that,
not
but
even my mum says that. Not even my mum says that.
apparently she doesn't know you as well as I do, which is a problem.
Yeah.
We'll discuss that with your therapist later. Anyway, but a lot of stuff's going on there right now. Yeah, this we're going to talk a little bit here in the latter part of this topic here with the Russia-Ukraine war. And there's a NATO summit going on right now with foreign ministers in Europe right now. But really, what's on the most people's radar is these tariffs that are coming out of the White House, which are literally going all around the world. Trump has placed, I think, a baseline 10% tariff on virtually every country in the world, oddly enough, except Russia. Definitely does include the UK. And then there's all kinds of extra tariffs put on a bunch of different countries. So like Vietnam had like 48%, as well as a couple of other countries, and some had more, some had less. And we're talking even some allies, much less, unfriendly countries, as some call them. But gosh, first of all, just what is the view in London? Because I mean, UK is supposed to be our best ally, and a lot of people thought, well, they'll be left off the list; they won't have to face any tariffs. But yet, there they are.
Yeah, it's just an interesting time. So, just to give you a little bit of background, and I'll explain why I'm about to tell you what I'm about to tell you. I have just come from a children's party, so 30 plus adults, 15 to 18, sort of 6 to 8 year olds, a hot tub, one of these inflatable hot tubs, and a load of kids running around and parents drinking wine. So that's where I've just come from. So the dads are talking, as you do, over I'm being a weirdo. I drink cups of tea, but they're all having a beer and a gin and tonic, which I've supplied. And the first words of the conversation is Trump is mental. He's mental. The guy's a complete maniac. He's mental. And that's just before we even started talking about tariffs. And that
Trump wasn't even about the tariffs.
Yeah.
Oh,
just
man.
Trump. Trump's a lunatic. Trump's a completely lunatic. Hasn't got a clue what he's doing. Now, as I've said before on your show, I'm not a massive Trumper. I'm certainly not a natural Trumper. But there has to be a method to his madness. Even if you disagree with it, there has to be a method to his madness. I can't believe that he's just completely insane and just randomly makes up stuff. Perhaps that's easier to believe if you dislike him. But, before, I mean, the only analogy I would give you is before, last time when he was president, or the first time that he was president, before he went to meet the leader of North Korea, it was all gung-ho and about fire and fury and everything that the Americans
man and all that, yeah.
And then when they met, they were friends. Shook hands and they were pals. I mean, it was funny. He kept calling him Rocket Man, which I thought was hilarious. But it was. But I just think that's Trump style. Come in with just massive force. Whether that be physical force or the threat of physical force, or in this case, massive sanctions, tearing up the rule book, throwing it all over the place, creating chaos, and then everybody having to defer back to him and his team to make some order. I actually think that's what he's playing. I think that's.
And so, what were some of the folks in your little party there? What do they specifically think on the tariff issue?
I can't. Well, I can tell you what they think. I can't repeat the words that they used.
Oh,
it's a family show. But yeah, they just couldn't understand it. They genuinely just thought he is a such and such idiot. Swear words, expletives used. Just he hasn't got a clue what he's doing. He's just making up all this stuff. Well, I actually don't think that's true. I actually think that it's his style to just try and create absolute chaos, so that people have to defer back to him to create some order that he controls. If that makes sense.
Well, I'm going to get to the what Trump is actually saying, and there was a piece on Sky News, which we'll see here in a second, where they kind of implied that there may be a method to the madness. We'll see if it's going to work, but there is a plan, actually. First of all, let's take a look in here. Here's what Trump, when he announced it.
Oh, okay.
If you look at that, China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs. charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So 67%, I think you can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes. We didn't want to bring, it's very windy out here. We didn't want to bring out the big charts because it had no chance of standing. Fortunately, we came armed with a little smaller chart. So 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less. So how can anybody be upset? They will be, because we never charge anybody anything, but now we're going to charge. European Union, they're very tough, very, very tough traders. You know, you think of European Union, very friendly. They rip us off. It's so sad to see. It's so pathetic.
So that was his comment there. And Gary, yeah, that's something that we see Trump say a lot about, you know, this or that person is ripping us off or whatever. Have you seen anything in the news about what that actually means? Because I've all heard the phrase, but I've never heard any description.
Oh, he basically says just, you know, previous presidents and administrations have never taken any of them to task to even out the trade imbalances. So he likens that to being ripped off, and he says, you know, listen, in one sense, he doesn't blame them for ripping us off because all our previous administrations allowed it. That's how he describes it.
Yeah, and Ian, does anybody? This is probably a silly question, but does anybody that you've seen, whether it's your party or just on the news in London, that says, well, yeah, he's kind of got a point. We have been kind of cheating them in the past. How do they see that charge?
I don't think people really look at it objectively enough, because America is so into the American system or state is so intertwined with what we do, and we've had this discussion many times in the past. Certainly on a military level, all your US bases here, some of the secret security arrangements here in the UK are run by the Americans. Same with Europe. That, you know, you're like our best buddy, our closest cousin. You're my brother or my sister, or vice versa. So when you start talking about it commercially, people don't think about the monetary side. We just think that you're always there with us, we're always there with you. We don't think about the cost. We don't think, hang on, when we go and do things together, you pay more than we do, or vice versa. I don't think people, I'm talking about the public now. Yeah. I don't think they look at it from a commercial perspective, and that's the problem. And he's a businessman, and he's looking at it from a commercial perspective. He's saying, we do all this stuff, you contribute this, and you know, that could be, as Gary said, a trade deal. You know, you do more with us, or we do less with you, or vice versa. So yeah, he's purely looking at it as a transactional commercial deal. And life isn't always about commercial transactional deals, if that makes sense. But that's how he appears to be looking at it.
Yeah,
mums and dads are just focusing on their families.
Yeah, and I'm just not sure that's going to work.
No,
so far. I mean, and actually, let me jump to let's see. Oh yeah, so next I want to look at from the Sky News here, because he's actually going to say this, at least as best as they can put together, this is the intent behind Trump doing all these tariffs.
To collect these tariffs. But the point that Donald Trump wants to make, can I show one more chart, like as a bonus thing? But the point that Donald Trump wants to make is that back in a long time ago, the majority of federal revenues came from tariffs, raising money from tariffs. And right now that line is basically down, you know, close to zero, kind of only a few percent. And his point is always, rather than raising money through income tax, couldn't we raise it again through tariffs? And I'll spare you the next charts, but point out that ultimately that is really, really tough to do. It's really tough in the modern world of 2025, when you have, you know, welfare states, when you have Medicare, when you have, you know, standing armies that are quite expensive. You can't just raise all of your money through tariffs. No one has been able to do that. And so
yeah, that's good enough right there, Gary. Yeah, that's the gist of it. At least what's being reported, even on this side, is that the claim is that Trump wants to lower the cost of doing business for the United States government. That's one of the reasons why he's just gashing the federal government and firing off hundreds of thousands of people because they want to spend less on the government. And then they want to eventually get more tax breaks for the American people by costing them less, letting them keep more of their money. But you have, even with the reduction in the cost of the government, it still costs money. So you're going to have to get it from somewhere. And so he's saying, well, we'll just look back in history when we used to make a lot of our money through tariffs and not from, income tax. And so we're going to go back to that and put it in. But that's the theory. But as you just mentioned here, the world is tremendously intertwined, not even just the United States and UK or our European allies, but really across the globe. And it just seems to me that it's wishful thinking to think that is actually going to work, because we have these, retaliations. Nobody on the other side of the equation is going to say, yeah, we'll help you with your tax problem by giving you our money.
Yeah, of course. I mean, absolutely 100%. Working off the assumption that we are all poodles and vassals of the US. And we say, yeah, no problem at all, Mr. Trump, President Trump. We'll accept whatever you say, but that's just never going to happen. It's just never going to happen. You heard, I always call her von der Leyen, just say we have the tools, we can do, all this kind of stuff. The Europeans will, who don't like Trump, and politically they're on the opposite side. They are Democrats. And they're the worst kind, they're neocon globalist Democrats who want war. They're not going to accept it. And their economies are all in a mess. They're not even coming from a position of strength. Their position, they're all borrowing money. Germany's getting even more indebted for, we can talk about this maybe today or later. But, they're all in a mess. So to be spending more money out to be punished by America, it's insane. That's because none of this makes sense. It can't work. It just cannot work. That's why I have no idea if I'm right or wrong. My thought was that Trump's like his discussions with Rocket Man, pre-Rocket Man's meeting, was come in fire and fury and mess the whole thing up, stir the whole thing up, and then now we're going to have dialogue, because everyone wants to talk. Everybody has to talk. They're forced to talk. And if he can negotiate a better position for America, good for him, because that's his job. That's the only thing that makes sense, because nobody's going to roll over and do what he says.
Yeah, that's maybe his hope. But you mentioned Ursula von der Leyen. Here's how she reacted just before the tariffs were officially announced. But she said, here's her shot across the bow.
Europe holds a lot of cards, from trade to technology to the size of our market. But this strength is also built on our readiness to take firm countermeasures if necessary. All instruments are on the table. Our immediate response to tariffs is unity and determination. Our objective is a negotiated solution. But of course, if need be, we will protect our interests, our people and our companies. Europe has not started this confrontation. We do not necessarily want to retaliate. But if it is necessary, we have a strong plan to retaliate, and we will use it.
I mean, that's pretty strong language. We have the cards, we have the leverage, and we're going to use it. But I mean, really, kind of as you said there, will they be willing to do that? She made a comment in that also, we have our unity is our strength. Now, when you're talking about the Russia-Ukraine war and stuff, there's a lot of fragmentation going on, but this may be one area where they might be unified.
Well, I wouldn't trust her as far as I could throw her personally. But, as a spokesman for the globalists and all the people that want war and all that kind of stuff, I was going to say she's your man, but obviously she's your woman. But she's very headstrong, very determined, and she fits the role perfectly, to be quite frank. But the Europe is so divided. It's so divided. It's just a complete mess. So from this chaos that's now being caused, that I believe there'll be dialogue and there'll be renegotiations, and Trump will try and negotiate as best as he can to improve America's trading position. Good for him. That's his job. But But I mean, everything that he suggested is not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Well, and then, I mean, let's just look at it from the UK perspective. I mean, you say good for Trump, whatever his country is. Obviously, Keir Starmer will do the same thing, or at least attempt to do so from his side, that he's going to do everything he can to protect his own constituents and their own pocketbooks, et cetera. So the question is going to be, I mean, you used the term a second ago, poodle, which some have accused the UK of being for decades, actually,
Forever.
to the United States.
Forever.
But now, okay, forever. But now then we're talking about, your pocketbooks. Do you think that he'll be willing to take reciprocal action against the United States?
I just think that because of the anti-Trump sentiment that's here in the press, and just it's not a scientific survey, just a chat this evening with a load of parents. People don't like Trump.
In hot tubs.
In
hot tubs.
I was trying to be discreet. But yeah, people don't like Trump. The press doesn't like Trump. He's on a completely different page politically from the UK and the rest of Europe. I think it will be a really good. I think the press will put massive pressure on Keir Starmer and the media to be seen to be standing up for Britain. So he'll do something. How robust he will be, I have no idea. But I don't believe he will accept it. And I'm not a Keir Starmer fan, but I really don't believe he will just accept it. There will be some pushback. How strong? I don't know. Not that. I suggest not that strong.
Yeah, and when you're talking about retaliation, obviously this is from all quarters. I mean, you can say Europe is unified, but each individual nation was tariffed to different degrees, and so each individual nation is going to be wanting to push back on some terms. So it's one thing if you have, like the Russia-Ukraine war, right? So we're trying to negotiate with that. We're negotiating primarily with Russia, and then we're including Ukraine and listening to the European Union, whatever. But it's like 4 players altogether, really, and 2 main ones. This one is every 185. There was a tiny little dot out in the Pacific Ocean you may have heard about, that, or the Atlantic, Arctic Ocean, I think, where in the South Pole area, where there was one country that was tariffed to 10% that only is populated by penguins. So I'm not sure a lot of thought was put into all this stuff.
No, that's why I suggest it's more bluster and bluff. Stir the whole pot up, and then go in for negotiations and negotiate hard. That's what I think. And we'll see.
And we will see, because, I mean, some of the pushback's already coming. Like, for example, China. China announced today that they're going to fire back an additional 34% tariff on top of what they were already doing, because there's been a lot of low-level tariffs that were going on that most nations have, or at least a lot of them do. So there had been some tariffs on the U.S. because of the previous iterations of these trade wars. But China said, we're going to add 34% off, which I think just mirrored what Trump added on top of them. So now then you're talking about stuff that can hit us in our pocketbook. So now then the question is going to be, if this is negotiation, has Trump put himself into a position to where, with the heavyweights, that he can't get into a big punching, exchange back and forth, or give in? Because if he gives in after China came in with this, not threat, but actually imposition of 34% tariff, if he doesn't give in, that's going to cost more when I go to Walmart, or to stores around here, and nearly everything else in my iPhone, et cetera. That's going to be hitting across the board. Taiwan also had a huge amount of, which is where a lot of the components for the iPhone come from, et cetera. So this could go south pretty fast.
Yeah, I have no idea who advises him. I have no idea who advises him. I mean, he does some. I mean, he's done some great stuff. I mean, some really, really good stuff. So as I said, I'm not a Trump fan, but a massive Trumper. But praise where praise is due. The first time that he was president, he sat down with the board of Ford and said, if you close down these plants and send them to Mexico, because they can make more money and they can produce them cheaper and then they can make more profit, I will slap this massive tax on you on imports, which will make it much, much harder for you to sell these cars. And I thought that took courage to do that. It took real courage to have that conversation with these people. And that's great. That's really great. It's great that he was looking after the US in that way. So he does do some good things. But on this stuff, he's in Alice in Wonderland, I think. That's the only way I can describe it. Alice in Wonderland politics. It's crazy.
Hey, Danny, let me play our friends over at All In podcast had a similar take. Friedberg over there. and he was talking about basically these are my words, the political theater of all that's going on there.
Mm.
Give me a second. Wrong one. Give me a second. Sorry about that.
Probably would have been good anyway, though. Those all-in pods are pretty good.
You don't believe them. And they actually have to do it in order to get the negotiating leverage that they need to be able to negotiate trade deals ultimately. And they have to look a little crazy, maybe. I mean,
that's your position, Freeberg? They're in the 4D chess, or?
I'm trying to rationalize one kind of rational reason for why a lot of smart people would end up putting that board up, that poster board up, where, to your point, Ben, they said that these are kind of the tariffs that are being levied upon our country, when in fact it is simply the math of imports minus exports divided by imports. That's what the number was, and it was maxed out at that number or 10%, and that's what they did. So they did that basically as a way, in my opinion, it looks like, and I'm just trying to take a read on this, that they're using this as a way to anchor for negotiations going forward, to make the case we are declaratively, crazily off the friggin' ship, going to do whatever the heck we want to do here in this administration. Now everyone takes them seriously. Now everyone shows up to the negotiating table, and now they can actually negotiate and then announce a series of win after win after win and say, we got this set of countries to capitulate today. This is the deal we worked out. It's a totally unique deal. This set of deals we worked out today. This set of deals we worked out today. And basically getting all the trade representatives to the table by making the case that they're actually willing to go all the way to the wall on stuff. So that's the only way I can kind of rationalize this rollout, Ben.
So he's basically saying that that Trump did this to scare them to the table, and that's why, we will put these tariffs in place. And we put them in place, and now therefore everybody says, wow, he wasn't just calling our bluff, he really did it. And now they'll show up at the table to make a deal.
Yeah, that was my point. Stir it all up, and everyone defers back to Trump and his team, and they sail a route through this. But, you know, I mean, I've worked for some big companies, and obviously I run my own businesses now. And the golden rule of any business is you keep your costs under control. You have to understand your costs. And then once you understand them, you have to manage them and control them appropriately. And what's the US debt? Is it 36, 37 trillion? I mean, it's telephone numbers. I mean, it's numbers that you just cannot comprehend. You know, it's Alice in Wonderland economics. It's trillions and trillions in debt. So, you know, while we're arguing about 10% here and 2% here and all that, and I guess, and I understand that all of those things accumulatively add up and make big sums of money. I understand that. But he should be, you know, how many, was it 850 bases, US military bases around the world? I know Doge are going there with chainsaws and chopping everything up. I understand that. But, you know, they should cut US government spending, and I know they are. But that's their biggest issue. They spend more than they gain. You know, they've got money coming in through various taxations, whether it be direct tax or indirect tax, or tariffs or whatever you want to call them. They're all forms of tax. There's not enough money coming in to cover the costs. Well, you need to reduce your costs. You need to reduce your costs and cut spending. That's it. It's not rocket science. It's really not rocket science.
It's not. Of course, it's devils in the details is an understatement. It's the pain involved. Every time, Senator Rand Paul has been a big advocate of this for his entire career, of wanting to get back to something close to a balanced budget, because he said, look, if you're gonna promote new spending or advocate new spending, then where are you going to cut? It's got to be a zero-sum situation. He's never been successful at it. He's always tried. He always points it out. But every single time you want to say about cutting anything, you have a constituency on that side that goes crazy, and they bring all their lobbyists in, and they have all their commercials that convince the country that the world will fall apart if we cut this by 1% or whatever, you know. And so the political pain has been not worth the gain, so no one takes it. But now here comes Trump, and he's coming in like the Doge chainsaw to the tariff chainsaw to the global. Problem is with this one, this is not just a gamble for the U.S., this is a gamble for the world. France 24 had a headline out earlier today that I think kind of captures the mood that a lot of people have here, that this is risking a global recession. If the U.S. goes down here, and if this doesn't work, or if it doesn't work fast enough, I mean, you could have a recession here pretty quick. And it could cause us, that's the one right there. That this Big Bang, the tariff Big Bang, puts the global economy under threat. Because I mean, even here in the United States, even some of the advocates of this have said, okay, there'll be some near-term pain, but then it's going to have long-term gain. That's only if, number one, that the gap is very short between the imposition and the lifting and the benefit that he's talking about coming in. But if it doesn't work out that way, if China stays firm with this, if some of these other countries stay firm with what it is, and we can't get a negotiated deal that we like in time, all of a sudden everybody's economy starts to wobble, and now you're in a real world of hurt.
Yeah, I mean, America's not coming from a position of strength with 36, 37 trillion. The European Union is in a complete mess. The economy is in a complete mess. It's really, really dangerous. And I can't remember which US TV channel. It might be NBC. Forgive me if I've got it wrong, but it's one of the US channels did a little deep dive into car parts, and they showed you that the alloy wheels came from Korea. The brakes came from such and such a country, and collectively from Vietnam, and collectively all of the parts of this car came from so many vast different places that the net effect on the end product is going to be horrendous. So that's why it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't look, this has really been thought through, and I believe it's all there as to create a storm, and everybody will defer back to Trump.
And Gary, there's a domestic risk on this as well, because, Trump has campaigned on making groceries go down. On day one, I'm going to make the groceries go down, the price of eggs, all that kind of stuff. This is going to have almost an immediate rise in prices on top of the pain that was already there, which is in part what got him elected, because people believed in that and they were worried about the groceries before. What do you think is going to be the risk domestically if Trump doesn't come up with some big wins pretty quick that lower the price of eggs?
Yeah, he's going to need some distractions, I think, Danny, unless something unusually dramatic happens. So let's say get some movement with this peace deal between the Ukraine and Russia, something to distract. I don't know what else. There could be other distractions along the way that he can push to the forefront and make some other headlines, because it doesn't look like in the short term it will be a smooth ride for him at all.
And I suspect, though, that lots of Americans are like the people at the hot tub party that Ian was at earlier today. They're not that interested in what's going on outside, but they're real interested in what happens when they go to the grocery store and pay their prices. So I don't even know if that kind of a distraction would make them go, okay, that's fine, but I got to go to the Walmart grocery store today and I need the price lower.
But I mean, where is good old fashioned diplomacy in this? So, I'm Keir Starmer and you're Trump. And, whether we sit down and talk face to face, and it would be much better if we did rather than do it over a Zoom call or conference call or whatever. And I say, look, or I'm Trump and you're Starmer. And I say, Danny, Mr. Trump, Danny, I need some help here. I'm under severe political pressure at home. I've promised this. Can you help me out with blah, blah, even if it's only short term for 6 months? Can you help me out with this? And we do a little deal and we try and work something out that works for all of us in both ways, and have a negotiation that works, rather than say, Danny, I'm going to threaten you with this. I mean, it's nonsense. It's Trump, isn't it? I mean, it's just Trump. That's his style. That's the problem. But then where's the diplomacy? Where's the human touch? Where's the relationship? I mean, you keep saying everyone's ripping, you're ripping me off. I'm ripping you off. You're ripping me off. Friends don't rip each other off. It just doesn't happen. We may have misunderstandings. We may disagree on certain things, but we don't rip each other off. It's that emotive language. It's just Trump all over, isn't it? It's just his style, I suggest, which is why he's coming in, like Hong Kong Phooey, all guns firing and stuff, Bless him.
And you mentioned what he's doing with the Russia-Ukraine thing. That's one thing that, like we do on this channel. I think every time even you're on with us, we don't hesitate to say anybody who's doing something right, and we don't hesitate to call them out when they're doing it wrong either. That's why we say we're unintimidated and uncompromised to tell people the truth, no matter what it is, whether it's Trump, Biden, Keir Starmer, or anybody else. But let's take a look at that situation here. Let's kind of pivot over to that a little bit in the time we have left. because there's also some things happening with that too in Europe today. There's a foreign ministers meeting of NATO. Lamy's there, Rubio's there, and really all of them are there. And there was some comments made today which get to part of the real problem, I think, in dealing with that portion of it in terms of getting the Russia-Ukraine war over with, is that first of all, you got to have a common understanding of what's real, and then what's just spin that you use. And you got to be able to distinguish between the two. And I'm not sure that we're getting this one right. First of all, let's take a look at your own Mr. Lamy.
Is that Putin continues to obfuscate, continues to drag his feet. He could accept a ceasefire now. He continues to bombard Ukraine, its civilian population, its energy supplies. We see you, Vladimir Putin. We know what you are doing.
Yeah, he sees and knows what they're doing, but they don't listen to him at the same time, right?
No.
They don't have the volume on. Yeah, maybe that's the problem.
Exactly.
Maybe that's what we should have been worried about.
I know this is meant to be a little bit lighthearted, so I'll just lower the conversation. But all you need to know about David Lammy, he was interviewed by Sky News. There's a clip online where he was asked, can a man get pregnant? And he said, yes, a man can grow a cervix. That's all you need to know about David Lammy.
Wow.
So I know I'm digressing. I'm digressing, but it is funny. It is funny.
Or tragic. I don't know. Tragic.
Yeah, no, both. Yeah, all of it. All of those things.
How it's talking here, but I actually talked about that clip earlier today in a different story that was focused on that stuff. But I actually mentioned to you, and now that you're here, I want to actually ask, because you talked about many times that the British press writ large is always been so much pro, supporting Ukraine to the end and all that kind of stuff. And so when people hear that. Putin's dragging his feet. Putin doesn't want to end the war. But we know what you're doing. Is especially given the guy who's talking about pregnant men, is that message also resonating with people in Britain?
Yeah, I mean, we're still under the same mind control, I'm afraid. So forgive me for repeating myself. I know I've said it many times previously on your show, but the narrative here in the UK for so many years is that Putin woke up one morning, and because he's the new Hitler, because he's evil incarnate, he thought, what can I do today? Oh, unprovoked, I'll invade another country. Why? Because I can. And that's what happened. People have no idea. So, this evening at the party, just chatting to some of the dads about some of the things that happened in Odessa, burning people alive in the town, in the trade union building, about the CIA overthrowing the democratically elected leader. And if you don't like that leader, was he corrupt? Possibly. I would imagine that he probably was. But that's none of our business. Just because someone's corrupt in another country doesn't give us a right to go and overthrow the democratic view of the people. And they have no idea about this. They have no idea because it's not on BBC, it's not on Sky News, and obviously in the US you had Fox and CNN. You won't see that anywhere else. And so that narrative pervades. Yesterday we were discussing Finland, and in your comments, so before this show, tonight's show now started, there was a comment I read in the comments. There was only a couple of comments because the show hadn't started, about Finland. And there's he's the CEO, Thomas Malin, is a friend from Twitter. I still call it Twitter because I'm old. And when I was in Finland, in Helsinki at Christmas, I met up with him. We had lunch together. Lovely chap. He's the CEO of an economics company, and he's Finnish. And just as they are in Finland, just as we are here, we still have that Cold War propaganda. Russia is the old Soviet Union. Putin's trying to recreate that Soviet empire. All this kind of nonsense, but people believe it. And because there's a war going and the whole of the media is on the side of Ukraine, they have no understanding of what caused it, how it happened. And the word unprovoked pops up all of the time. But it wasn't unprovoked. And that's the problem. People don't know that information control. And until there's a change in that information control, which isn't going to happen overnight, even if it comes, and I suggest it will come at some point because it will have to, but that will take a lot of time.
Here's the question I wanted to ask you specifically on that one as well. So I speculated that Lammy was not speaking to Putin. He was speaking to the people in the UK, right? So that we're on top of this. We're doing, we're pushing hard on that evil Putin and all that kind of stuff. Make their government sound good, make it sound like they're really trying. But obviously, it's just bouncing off a brick wall when you're talking about on the Russian side, because they're going, dude, what are you talking about? I mean, here are the other 12 issues involved here that you're not even talking about here, which are all necessary to end this. Because that's important, because if we keep going down the path especially the European portion of NATO, like he did, and I can show you the one from France here in a second, but he said basically the same thing. You're not gonna, you may satisfy your domestic audiences here, but the audience that matters about reaching a negotiated settlement of this is not even going to entertain the thought, because you're not even talking about the issues that they've said are on the table here. So the problem is that if you talk this way only, then you make it more likely that Russia will never agree to a deal, and they'll just keep fighting until they win. Do you think, and I know you don't have personal knowledge, but is your impression that the senior British officials understand that and they're okay with it going that way, or do they just not want to be seen as losing a negotiated settlement?
Well, I'm going to avoid answering your question. I'm going to come back to it. So I'm not avoiding answering your question. I think it's worse than what you just said, and I'll explain why. We have no diplomacy with Russia, as you'll know from your guest and our mutual friend Ian Proud, British diplomat based in Moscow. We have no diplomacy with Moscow. We don't talk to the Kremlin. Britain gets all of its information secondhand. So if we want to know what's going on in Russia, what the Russian view is, what's the Russian feeling on a subject, we have to go and talk to the French and the Germans and get that information secondhand, because we won't talk to Putin because he's demon, he's Hitler and all this kind of nonsense. So when Lammy stands up and says, we're negotiating hard, we're fighting hard for you and all of this kind of stuff, it's complete nonsense. Because it's like me walking outside into the Mews outside my office and just standing there going, oh, I'm going to change the world. I really mean it. I really feel strong about this. Just hot air. No one's listening. It's completely meaningless. So when he stands there and he's really robust, looks at the reporter and says, we're doing this and we're doing that, and Putin, we're on you. It's nonsense. The Russians don't care what we think. I'm talking about Britain, are insignificant because we have no diplomacy with Russia. So everything we say is meaningless. Does that make sense?
Well, that part makes sense, but they have to know that. So by keeping to that mentality and that path of not talking, they have to be aware that means that there won't be a diplomatic end and Russia will simply keep fighting. Are they okay with that?
Well, there's 2 points to that. So firstly, the British public doesn't know the British or the Foreign Office's stance on Russia, that we don't talk with Russia, we don't negotiate with Russia. Of our information secondhand. The public don't know that. And then to address your point, which I just think they've lost the plot. I just think we're ruled by idiots, because David Lammy knows that we don't talk to Russia. He knows that we get all our information secondhand, because he would be the person that's deferring to France and Germany to get information. But he's putting on a show for the public to say about how we're on top of this, we're on this, we're watching you, we're going to do this. We're not doing anything, and whatever we say is just completely meaningless. So do they know that? They have to know that, as stupid as they are, if that makes sense.
Well,
it's so depressing. It's so depressing.
Yeah, again, because the bill payers for this are the Ukrainian men that are sent to fight and die in a losing battle that can't be won. But
I talked about that this evening. I said, where's Ukraine getting all its soldiers? And they said, well, national recruitment drives and all this kind of stuff. I said, right, have you been online and seen where they just pull up at bus stops and pull people off the street? No, I don't believe it. Go online, because you'll never see that on the news. You'll never see that on the news. You'll never see it in the mainstream media, because of the propaganda that we're subjected to. And we believe in this country that the Russians are subjected to propaganda. I know I've said this many moons ago in one of the earlier shows when I was with the Royal Air Force. So we were doing an event with the Royal Air Force, and I'm talking to intelligent fighter pilots, and one of them said to me, "Yeah, the problem is in Russia they've only got 4 or 5 TV stations, and they're all state controlled. So the whole of Russia has this media narrative. So they're all controlled. They don't know what's going on." And I'm going, oh, I didn't know that. I've been to St. Petersburg, watched CNN in my hotel room. I know it's just nonsense, but he swallowed the Kool-Aid. So we are the propagandized. I'm not saying that the Russians aren't propagandized. Don't get me wrong, but we are severely propagandized here, but we don't know it. And it sounds insane when you say that to people. I mentioned a few moments ago we were talking about Finland here in my office yesterday. Because Stubbs, Alexander Stubbs, the president, was, he wants war with Russia. Finland's on a war footing with Russia. They've got adverts on TV talking about their bunkers. Now the bunkers that Finland had are old, cold, and they're not building new bunkers. They've had them for 40, 50 years, so they've just been there a long time. But they've got skating rings in them, all sorts of stuff. It's really clever what they've done. But Finland's now on a war footing against Russia, when for 40 plus years they've had good trading relations and prosperity and good relations with Russia. And one of the people here in my office who is Finnish said, "Yeah, but you've never had to live under Russian control. The Russians going back to the Second World War. After that, took a big area of Finland called Karelia, which they did. If that's been part of your culture, it's there. You're aware of it. But it's just it is ultimately, when you look at it, a Cold War mentality. I believe in diplomacy. I believe in talking to people, as Churchill always said, Georgiou is better than war. Why can't the Finns go back and talk to the Russians, saying, "Look, okay, you took all this land off us. Can we renegotiate?" They'll probably say no. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't have the conversation. You shouldn't make that assumption. Anything can be negotiated. It might not be up for sale. It might not be up for grabs. But negotiations are negotiations. But they don't. Negotiations aren't even on the table. It's just this blind hatred of all things Russian.
And Gary, let me ask you this here in one of our last. Well, we still have a little bit of time here. At that same negotiation, or that same meeting there, our foreign minister, Secretary of State Rubio was there, and Gary, I just want your view on this, because we didn't get a chance to chat about it earlier when we showed that comment by Rubio. It sounded a lot less confident than previous statements have. He's more like, well, maybe we can work out some kind of a deal, but we just have to kind of talk to him. Do you see any change in our position? Maybe that we're not as confident we can get a deal now.
Yeah, I do think his demeanor was strikingly different. I think reality is starting to settle in, and time is taking its toll on what their initial enthusiasm that, wow, we're going to get to sit down at the table and hammer this out, and then the hammering was hammered, and then, wow, okay, we've hammered, now what? And I think they're realizing that this might just roll on quite a bit longer than they had first anticipated. No slight on his enthusiasm, to begin with, and I think his head is in the right place. But when they sit down, and especially with how NATO's the antagonism that they're providing on the other side to basically throw wrenches in the machinery here.
Yeah, that's not helping.
Things. Right. Things are just playing out the way they are, and they're realizing, they're not going to strong arm Putin, much as they like to talk. And now they're not they, but especially with with what Lammy's doing. I mean, they're just talking past one another. So they're just words that are just flying by, and Putin's just sitting there as his troops just slowly, step by step, keep moving on, and continuing their denazification and demilitarization.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I keep saying that as well. That's that we always circle back to the who's paying the bill on this stuff, and it's the Ukraine side. I wonder, when Trump initially said during the campaign, "I'm going to end this in 24 hours. I'm going to have this war over with," and then he started to say, "Well, not actual 24 hours." When he started getting closer to being sworn in, but then it's like, "All right, well, but 100 days." Well, now even 100 days is starting to come in pretty quick. I think April 30th is the exact 100th day mark. And I'm looking at my clock, and you're going to have some pretty big movements made by then. But at what point? We'll look first of all, Gary, a domestic situation here. At what point, especially if we pass this 100-day mark and there's still no prospect for any kind of an end, did people start going, hang on, Trump, you said when we elected you that you would have this over in a day, but the impression was going to be really early. And now here, 100+ days later, you don't even have a plan. I mean, will that happen, or do you think Trump can just talk it out when it gets there?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I do think that they're starting to, and Rubio's the first, not the first, but one of the first examples of them lowering the expectations as to the timeliness of this all. So it's like, wow, we had great intentions, but now we have to, like, what's our plan B here? I think they're going to have to resort to their plan B.
Well, and yeah, Ian, from the UK side.
Well, didn't Trump did it? Yeah, I agree with Gary. I mean, I think Plan B, they'll be re-examining that. There'll be discussions about Plan B and what it really means. I mean, he couldn't resist threatening, saying, unless you do that, we'll put a 20% tariff on your oil. So the US is buying huge quantities of Russian oil from India. So if they do, which I don't believe they will, by the way, according to Trump, if he puts the 20% tariff on the oil, so it becomes 20% more expensive, and then you've got the tariff that he's going to put on the Indians who will be supplying them. The US won't be benefiting from cheap Russian oil anymore. So I just nonsense. It's just not really been thought out that well, and it's just Trump's ego and bluster and Hong Kong Phooey come in, fight him, and and then sort it all out afterwards. I think that's really. It's more of that than anything else.
Well, that's certainly the way it's starting to look out. And when he said 24 hours at the beginning, I'm like, well, obviously he doesn't mean physically 24 hours, unless he just walks in and says, "All right, Putin, what do you want? Where do you want me to sign?" Yeah, that'll be fine. Obviously that wasn't going to happen. But my anticipation or expectation or hope at the beginning was that, well, what he means is that's going to be my top priority at the beginning. We're going to get this off the table by, like, all right, what do you need? All right, here's what we're willing to agree to. Let's just get this off the table, and we'll just agree to this. Ukraine, you can either do it or not, but that's what I'm willing to do. I thought that's where he was going, but now then I'm starting to wonder if they even know where they're going, because that doesn't seem to be part of the conversation here.
I'm not convinced they fully understand it. I've always made the assumption that they do, because of people like yourself, Colonel McGregor, obviously John Misha and Professor Sachs, all these bright, much smarter than me, people like you, people that do understand the history of where we are and how we've got to today. The public are largely ignorant of that, certainly in the UK. So you'd assume the president fully understands that, but I'm not always convinced that he does. And, not just because of his actions, but because of the kind of people that he's surrounded himself with, which just doesn't make sense to me. But, I'm not the president.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that we could do a whole show on that part there later on too. Maybe we will. But anyway, we'll leave it there for right now. But really appreciate you coming on, because you always have these great insights. Love to have you on the show here.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you so much.
Certainly my pleasure. And we thank you guys for watching too, because it's always a pleasure to be putting these on shows for you as well. Be sure and like and subscribe if you haven't done that on the way out. And we will look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Daniel Davis.